Good morning, everyone. We're going to start just a little bit early today because I decided I found a new thing when I was participating as a webinar person this week, and I thought I would share that with you. So once I figure out how to share, we'll get that done. All right, if I did this right, everybody should see Fabulous Fridays, as well as our sponsors for this series, the Montana 4-H Foundation, and also the Montana Center for Youth Development. Okay, so here is what I found out when I was participating this week in a webinar. You know, you have the opportunity to see the PowerPoints real large, which is fine. And then across the top, in my case, there were a lot of people that had their cameras on. But what we're going to take a look at is what could you do if you decide that you wanted to have the speaker a little bit larger. I've had a couple of people tell me I kind of have a small head. And I hope that doesn't mean small brain. But anyway, let's take a look. This is my colleague, Brianna. She's our nutrition specialist, by the way, and has all kinds of great programs. But if you take your little pointer for your mouse up there and you click on this, and once you do that, you'll see there are 3 dots that appear. So you click on that, and what you'll discover is the screen is going to offer you more options. And you may wonder, well, what are those options? Well, it allows you to move the speaker to the stage. And so while they were talking, I was trying to wonder what the stage is. So I played around with it. And if you're like me, you might be afraid that, oh, gee, if I do anything like that, I'll just lose everything. Now, you could practice, and if you do lose us, come back in, not a problem. But anyway, I figured out that if you move to a stage, this is what happens. Okay, what it does then is show the PowerPoint and the presenter in equal size. So that can work if you like that. But I discovered that some of the PowerPoints that were being shown to us were kind of tiny and difficult to read. So I decided what I want to, well, I saw a little thing and I wonder if I would push or pull this thing, what would happen? So there's a little thing in the center of those 2 pictures there, and you can push on that and an arrow will show and it will go either way. So if you push that arrow one way, well, what it's going to do is increase the size of the PowerPoint that we've got. Okay, so that sometimes makes it a little bit easier depending on how big the PowerPoint is. But one of the things I try to do is make mine big to begin with. You know, I just hate to go to a presentation and somebody says, well, I know these are too small, but nah, make them big enough. That's my educational philosophy. Okay, so we've got that. And then if you push that the other way, what it does is make the speaker a little bit larger. And I'll apologize to Brianna on this one because that's probably not the one she would have selected. But it makes the point that you can be in charge. And if you just want a little bit bigger presenter, you can do that. You're in charge of it. Okay, well, I'm looking at the clock and I discover that what we have is a couple of minutes before we officially start. And what I discovered is that we had last time some questions about joint tenancy with right of survivorship. And somebody said, would you just review that 120-hour survival requirement again? And if you recall, what we had was like Tim and Sharon, and maybe they had property in joint tenancy with right of survivorship. And what we do is we have an accident. And in that accident, Tim is killed immediately. Sharon survives for 3 days, and then she passes away. So the question that I had for you is, well, who is going to receive the property? Well, you see, in that case, Sharon did not survive Tim by 120 hours or 5 days. So that means that she was treated as predeceasing Tim. I know that sounds weird, but that's the way the law reads. So when the property is in joint tenancy like that, then what happens is the property goes half to Tim's folks and half to Sharon's folks. Okay, and then we discover Tim dies first and Sharon dies 6 days, 7, 8 days later. Well, then she did meet that 120-hour survival requirement, and therefore the property that was in joint tenancy between Tim and Sharon goes from Tim to Sharon. She met the 120-hour survival requirement, and so all the property goes to Sharon's folks. So that's the example that I use with what I call my younger generation, so that they can see that even though they don't have children, there is a need for a will. And I know when we start out as young couples, we may not even have that much. But I dare say within families, there's some strong feeling about whether his folks gets it or her folks gets it, or whether they would want it to go half and half. Now, remember, it's in joint tenancy to begin with. So the will at that point doesn't control. But what the will would control then is when both of them are deceased. The will would say, oh, we want Sharon's property to go to her, you know, half of that to go to hers and half the other, but you decide that. Okay, well, I can see that we can officially start now, and I'm really excited to have today's program to be able to share with you because, well, I better introduce our team, hadn't I? My name is Marcia Getting, for those of you that are joining us for the first time, and I'm the Family Economics Specialist for Montana State University Extension. So I'm delighted to be a part of this particular program with the sponsorship of the 4-H Foundation and the Montana Center for Youth Development. Our webinar assistant, some of you may have dealt with her because you had a question or two. Carrie is the one that developed the website. She looks at my slides and says, Marcia, you've got a misspelling there. She does everything behind the scenes, but she's a little camera shy. So you won't get to see her, but maybe I can persuade her at the last session to be out there for you. But at least I've got her photo. I am so thrilled that we have 242 Montanans that are interested in the topics that we are having for Fabulous Fridays. And we even have 16 out-of-staters. And I still look at that one in Alaska and try to think, oh my gosh, what time is it there? Oh, I don't know. So as I've mentioned in the past, and I know some of you that have done this for several times, at this point you're saying, okay, I think I'll go refill my coffee because I've heard this before. Well, yeah, we do have some new people. So I want to be able to share with you one of my engagement tools is wildflowers. You can probably tell that by just looking around my room. This is what I call my remote office. This is where I worked for a year and 3 months during the COVID, and I decided that I would like to continue to do my webinars from here just because it feels so peaceful compared to the office with everything going on, people coming and going and what have you, and even knocking on the door when you have a sign on the door that says webinar in process, and they come in and say, is it over yet? So they don't do that here. I've given my husband strict orders, do not disturb. These wildflowers, I hope, will help you remember some of the key points. And I got real tickled one time when I had looking at the chat room and I had questions, and it was, will let's see, it was would Grandma Richardson, and it was for the Richardson geranium, but they were asking questions using the names that I had used there. And just to prove to you, I do not pick the flowers. My husband and I, when we're out, we're very cautious about that. And we don't bring them into the studio. If you'll notice there, I have a black velvet on the back. And so when I take the pictures, they're right where they are. which can really get your body in interesting situations. So the next thing is a poll. And I want to ask you, what actions did you take as a result of the session last Friday? So you have a choice. Did you review titles on your financial accounts? Did you review titles on your real property? Did you share the information with some friends and relatives? And did you do something else as a result of our session that we had last Friday? So Carrie has pulled up the poll and you have a chance to click your answer. So you won't lose the screen if you click an answer, and I invite you to do so. I hope everybody notices I changed cups today after I spilt last week. Okay, let's see. Well, we've got the majority of the people that are looking at sharing the information. So we're really delighted that you're doing that, because that expands extension to others, and maybe they'll sign up for Fabulous Fridays as a result. So also the chat room. You see, I have here a pine drop that looks like a question mark. And truly, that is the way it looked when I took the photograph. So if you have questions as we go along, don't hesitate to ask those. And Carrie is going to get me the chat room. And so if there's some question in there, I will be able now to look at it and go, oh, I need to email that person. You see, we're giving you lots of privacy. Everybody's picture isn't up there. The only people that know who is participating is Carrie and I. And that way you're anonymous. So you don't need to be afraid that your sister-in-law over there in Glendive is wondering what you're doing by asking that particular question. And then also today we have a special guest, and that's Carter Jasper. And Carter is representing the 4-H Foundation. Yes, the board of directors of the 4-H Foundation has youth on the board. So stay tuned for some information from Carter. Now, last week, I unintentionally started kind of a contest, because I was asking you, well, what does Marcia have on her neck? And then I spilt my drink, and anyway, it fell off. Well, we had some people that indicated that they thought it was a bobcat scarf, and you were very close to that. And then we had 3 people that said it was a mask. Ta-da! You are the 3 that got it right. It was indeed a mask. That's what it looked like, and I just put it around like thus, but it didn't stay very good, did it? And today I have on another one, since I have more than one mask. So you 3, I decided, since there were 3 of you, I can send each one of you a card. So I will be doing that here. So don't hold your breath, just because, you know, post office is taking a while right now. Now the steer's head. What am I going to steer you towards today? Well, an awareness of the tools that our Montana legislature have given us so that we can avoid probate. Oh, as I've traveled the state, people hate probate, or they think they do. It's really a good process, but okay. And how we can use a transfer on death deed to distribute our real property as well and avoid probate. That is exciting to me. Now, what we have here, how about a guess? Well, every now and then I have at one of my meetings somebody that's a real botanist, and they even give the Latin name. I don't bother. This is a hobby for me, and it is a mountain death camas. And would you believe, early on in my wildflower days, I made a card out of this, and I sent the card to my best friend's mom, who has cancer, and I'm sending her a death camas card. I felt horrible. Absolutely. She's nice. She sent me back a note and indicated out there in the Lima Mountains that they had lost 7 sheep as a result of death camas. But, you know, it does remind me of death. But how about pods? A pod is a payable on death designation. And you can place that POD on any of your accounts that you have at financial institutions, such as banks and credit unions. And by doing so, You've got a checking account, you've got a savings account, you've got certificates of deposit, even United States savings bonds. You can put a POD on those. Now, as far as United States savings bond, however, they will only allow one. The others can have as many as you want to have. So the advantage of having a POD is that there is no probate. Okay, it goes directly to the beneficiary. The beneficiary brings into the institution an affidavit of death, which we have on our website, and a government issued photo ID, and the institution will give the money to that individual. Now, you could also POD to your favorite nonprofit. So you could say, I'm going to name my husband, but if he is killed with me, I want to POD it to the Montana 4-H Foundation. So you see, that's a successor beneficiary designation, and your institution can do that as well.
Marcia, you have a question.
Okay.
They want to know if a conversion title is the same as joint tenancy.
A conversion title. My goodness, that is a new one on me. So I can't answer that. I'm going to have some more information. So the person that asked that question, Carrie, you know who they are, and I'll get in touch with you and find out a little bit more since I don't know that one. Okay, Fabulous Friday tips from our Death Canvas is, yes, you can control where your checking accounts are going to go, your savings accounts, and you avoid probate fees at death. That is really great. Now, I was out in Yellowstone, and guess what I found? An albino fairy slipper. Only I didn't know it at the time. I thought it was a sick, excuse the term, but the fairy slipper that was too old. Well, see, a fairy slipper looks like this originally. And then I read that it's kind of rare, and I go, I had to work that into my presentation. You bet. So what we've got is the Albino family. And what we're going to do is see what happens to the Albino family. Now, the Albino family has a husband and wife. They have 3 kids, and they have spouses. And then they're blessed that they have had grandchildren. Now, some of you that have participated in the past may recognize this one, and you think you know what's coming. Well, let's take a look here. Yeah, we have things happen. 1999, we got a son that passed away, a daughter that passed away in eastern Montana because of a car wreck. We had a husband that passed away in 2008. So now what we've got is the mom, the wife, the grandma. And she has all the property, and she's got, in this case, not all the property, but a $100,000 certificate of deposit. And what grandma has done is look at the financial institution's, let's call it the signature card, only usually it's longer than that now. And what we want to know is, in that signature card or the piece of paper, does it say, when you're going to leave it to your children, does it say by right of representation, or does it say equally to my children? So this will kind of help us out here. You're looking at this particular example, and we've got grandchild D. And what I want to know is, if it's by right of representation, what fraction of that $100,000 certificate of deposit would red child D receive, if any? So we've got none, 1/6, 1/7, and 1/9. With right of representation on the POD form, what fraction does grandchild D receive of that? Now, we're not having a lot of you take advantage of the poll, and I encourage you to do so. It makes it more interesting for everybody else, because that way you can see, well, gee, I didn't know it, but nobody else did either. Okay, so none, 1/6, 1/7, or 1/9. What do you think that grandchild is going to receive? Okay, Carrie's put up the results here, and we've got a couple of people that think nothing. We've got some that say 1/6, and that's the majority. And then we've got some that also said 1/9. Sorry, I'm trying to get here where we can see, let you see the percentages there. So in this case, we had 81% of you not responding. And you see, this polling is supposed to be such a good deal, and maybe it's not. Maybe I should have you raise your hands. Right. Who would see you with raised hands? Okay, so let's see. What is the answer that we've got on this one? Okay, the answer is 1/9. So this is just like the example that we had with an estate in a prior session, that this grandchild is going to receive 1/9. Now we've got an albino grandchild over here that's turquoise. We've got this turquoise one here. That grandchild receives 1/3. And you see, we have the son with 1/3. And this representation means this child, in a sense, is representing the dad, who was a son of the mom. So it passes through by right of representation. And that is a very important concept for you to take a look at when you're signing your POD. Now, if mom would have put on there equally, she's writing a POD equally to my children, then what happens is that son receives it all. So the grandchild, or children in this case, do not receive any of that property. So that's the difference, and it's very important to know that so that you're not unintentionally disinheriting a grandchild when you want to recognize that grandchild. So the Fabulous Friday tip is, I think that Montanans and you out-of-staters as well, you need to know what is the difference between right of representation and equally. And if your state has a uniform probate code, chances are that you've got that right of representation in there as well. Now here I have a heart-leaved arnica. Okay, really kind of a cute daisy looking flower. And behind that, we have that rock with the lichens on it. I even took a class on lichens, which was fun. But back to the point here. We've got heart-to-heart legacy planning. And we've got Joe Hart and Brooke Hart. Oh, really nice couple. And they, Joe has heartfelt intentions. He also has a $100,000 CD, and he has designated his sweetheart as his POD beneficiary. Well, then later, Joe changes his mind. He changes his heartfelt intentions, and he now bequests the $100,000 CD to his son, Eric Hart. So you could guess what I'm going to ask you. Who receives the $100,000? Is it Brooke or is it Eric? Now, Brooke's the POD beneficiary. Eric was named as the devotee. That's a word you'll find in your will, the devotee. And that will was written after the POD beneficiary. So which one takes priority? Okay, so we're going to give you a little more time this time. Very easy, only 2 choices. And I want to see more than 81%. No. I want to get that 81% down further so that we have more participating. Okay, Carrie, you've ended the poll. I'm so eager to see what we've got here. And we've got 26% saying that it's Brooke. We've got 14% saying that it's Eric. So I fooled some of you. And we did move down from 81 to 60% that didn't answer because they think, oh, Marshall, know what I say. No, I don't know what you said, but let's take a look here. Yes, indeed, it is Brooke, because you see that POD form becomes a contract and the provision in the will is not validated. So even though you would submit the will for probate, that provision isn't honored because of the POD contract. So keep that in mind. So what should our friend Joe do? Well, he needs to go to his credit union or his bank and say, I want to fill out a new beneficiary designation form. No problem. He just does that, and then he names Eric. Now, I will probably date myself on this one, but there used to be a program where it was sing along, and I think the guy's name was Mitch. So I told Carrie I wanted to have a singing ball. And then I realized, why would I want to do that when I can't sing? But this, you could just pretend. You can't undo a POD with a will. And in person, I have my audience say this because I wanted to stick in their brain. So all of you can do this because you're not in anywhere that somebody will notice unless you're at the coffee shop. So let's all say it together. You can't undo a POD with a will. Ah, very good. Matter of fact, I was out in the state and I had one guy come up to me and he said, you can't undo a POD with a will. I knew he had been to one of my programs and I was thrilled, of course. Everybody else thought he was nuts, but So have a heart. Make sure that you review your beneficiary designations on your checking and savings accounts, your certificates of deposit, and those United States savings bonds that you have had in your safe deposit box for years. Who is the beneficiary? And maybe you don't have one because you didn't know that you could do that and avoid probate on that one. Now, we have more than one kind of death camas, I discovered. There's the mountain death camas and there's the meadow death camas. Well, I'm going to use the meadow one to share with you about TODs. These are transfer on death designations. Now, this is a law in Montana, but some of you have already done this with just what we call beneficiary designations. So you're fine with those. It's just Montana said we're going to use this term, transfer on death, on stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And some of our companies that are doing business in Montana are doing that. I've run across some where the people said, well, they told me I could only have one. And I'm going, what? I mean, why are we limiting an individual when you've got 3 kids and you want to treat your 3 kids equally and you can only name one? And then, of course, you expect that one to share with the other 2. I think these companies, well, you don't need to know my opinion. Make up your own mind whether or not you think that that's a good thing. But regardless, with a transfer on death registration, you can make sure that that goes to whoever you've selected, and then there's no probate. And of course, the other thing you can do is your TOD and PODs. You can decide on a local community foundation. Maybe you like the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, MSU Extension, hello, or the Montana 4-H Foundation. So take advantage of these TODs. You've got the PODs, now you got the TODs, and you can control your distribution and avoid probate fees at death. All righty. Now, you know about PODs and TODs. Will you place them on your financial accounts? This is an action that you can take this afternoon if you want to, the weather permitting. So yes, no, or do you already have PODs and TODs? Let me know in the polling question. Okay, and Carrie's ended the poll. So you see, you got to get your bid in there early. And I'm going to try to move this over so that we can see the percentages. Okay, so we've got 19% of you that are saying yes. Yay! We've got 5% saying no. But you may have a reason, and I understand that. And only 9% of you, though, have already a POD or a TOD. So those of you that already have them, good for you. Those of you that are going to do it, that's great. Okay. Okay, we have a new flower here, and this one you'll see in August in many of our national forests as well as Glacier National Park, and it's called an explorer's gentian. And what I want to do is explore with you a new law that's been around a couple of years though, a transfer on death deed. This is a way that you can transfer real property, your home. You can have $6 million worth of farmland or ranchland out there, and you can transfer that with a Todd, and this Todd has two Ds, and you can have one or more beneficiaries, and there is no cost of probate upon death. Now, what is a transfer on death deed? Well, it's one that you file while you're living, but while you're doing that, you name a beneficiary. That beneficiary can't sell it out from under you. See, you put that property in joint tenancy and you've got some challenges. That joint tenant might decide, oh, I'd rather sell it. Well, let's not think they're going to be that nasty. But with a beneficiary, they can't even use it as collateral for a loan. It's not theirs until you die. So all you have to do, and we have a form for that. As a matter of fact, one of our participants called me up and said, Marcia, you only have one beneficiary on there. It's very difficult for these fill in the form deals. So I told Carrie the problem, and Carrie was able to make 4 beneficiaries, for example, and take advantage of that. So basically,
Marcia,
yes, we got a question.
you have, yes. Is having a beneficiary on a savings account the same as a POD?
Yes, it is. It's just the legislature is using the terms now, payable on death and transfer on death registration. So they're the same things. So if you've already got some beneficiary designations on your stocks, your bonds, your mutual funds, you're fine. It's just a lot of people don't. And they don't know that they can avoid probate and the probate costs by having those. So we're looking at a transfer on death deed. We do have, as I mentioned, at the site and also at our Fabulous Fridays site. You need to take a look at that. Maybe the only time you looked was when you were going to register, but we got a lot of resources there. Carrie's posted a bunch of valuable topics that go along with what we're doing today. So you scroll to October 15th, you can check the resources, and ta-da, you've got some resources. So you file them with the clerk and recorder where your real property is located. Okay, so I would file my transfer on death deed in Gallatin County. Now, some of you have a beneficiary deed and you may think, oh my gosh, I got to refile. No, no, no. The legislature allows you, those were grandfathered in, so you're fine. But if you're going to lose sleep over it, go ahead, file another one. Now, let's say you're a land baron in Montana and you have property in Gallatin County and you have property in Richland County with oil wells on it. Wouldn't that be good? Yeah, okay. In that case, then the Gallatin County land has to go through the Gallatin County Clerk and Recorder's Office, and your land in Sydney is Richland County. So you've got to file for that one there. But, those are things you can do. Mailing, and now there's so much we can do with document signings and different things there too. So who can you decide that you want to be your beneficiaries? Spouse, children, relatives, friends, corporations, and of course your nonprofit. So you could name the Yellowstone Forever Foundation, okay, or my favorite nonprofit at the moment, the Montana 4-H Foundation. And then when a person dies, then the beneficiaries take the recorded Todd, the death certificate, and now there's a form, the Realty Transfer Certificate 488. All of this information is in more detail in the Mont Guide that's listed at the Fabulous Friday site. This is one that passed the legislature, and I was so excited. I thought, good, I'll do a Mont Guide, get it done in 2 days. We'll get it out there. Everybody will know about it. And then I decided, oh yeah, I've got a colleague at the School of Law, and I'll have her help me out. And she said, well, you don't want me to. And I said, why? I testified against the bill. I go, what? How could you do that? Well, so she told me. And there were all these other things to think about that I had not considered. So now we have an 8-page mock guide. So I really want you to take a look at that mock guide, read it more than once before you think about filing a beneficiary deed. So I also have to tell you this. Our title companies in Montana, some of them, will not issue insurance for at least a year. And their reasoning is because there is no probate, they're not sure if there might be some creditors out there or a lien on the place and all this type of stuff. So it's been kind of a shock to some kids that have been named beneficiaries and the individual has died. And now here we have this problem that we cannot get title insurance. So keep that in mind. So my Fabulous Friday tip is to continue to explore if a transfer on death deed is appropriate for your situation.
Marcia, you have a question.
Okay.
Can you please define probate? If the person who died has debts in that, not what probate process discovers. So what is probate?
Okay, probate is a procedure to make sure that property gets to the right individuals. So because of these tools that the legislature have made available, we have probate, or we have people who they decide we're not even going to take the will and submit the will for probate because you've used PODs and TODs and what have you, transfer on death deed. So we don't have that system. So the legislature then has said, okay, even though this $10,000 is supposed to go to Susie, well, the creditors need the opportunity to be paid. So it's one of those little areas that's a little interesting because Susie has the money, and is Susie going to come up with that to pay the creditors? So to be honest, what the planners are doing is saying, you know, you have an obligation to pay your debts, right? So when we do the planning, let's make sure that there's enough money out there that we do go ahead and pay X, Y, and Z. Now, with the transfer on death deed with property, what you've got is somebody that would inherit it, and then they will continue to make the payments because they've become the owner. If it's already paid for, that's not a problem. So later in our series, we're going to get close up and personal with probate and personal representatives, because there's 5 different ways that we can have probate in Montana. And I just don't have enough time today to get into all of those. But it's a legal procedure to make sure that's the whole purpose. Way back when people started getting property and Montana became a state, and that person dies without a will, the legislature had to step forward and say, okay, here's where we think that person would want the property to go. You know, and that's the main issue there with probate. Okay, now we have a foxglove. I happened to find this in the state of Washington. I thought they were very pretty, and they just fit in without foxing the law. Because what if your designated beneficiary dies before you do? I mean, that wasn't planned at all. Well, be foxy. And I couldn't resist sharing my little pictures of my foxes when I had a new camera. These are from the Beartooth. And oh, it was fun to see them and not have 50 cars on the highway. You can specify a successor. So let's take a look at Mark. Mark has filed a transfer on death deed. And let's say he dies. Well, it's going to go down to Evan. But if Evan dies with him or before Mark, then it's going to go down to Luke. And like I said, you could have more than one designated beneficiary for your transfer on death deed. So here we've got Luke and Lily. And you can guess what else. You could also recognize your favorite 4-H foundation, for example, with your Todd. So outfox the law and make sure that you are looking at naming successor beneficiaries or even a nonprofit. It could be the situation where you look at and say, you know, If both of us are gone and the kids are well set, let's give it to our favorite nonprofit. Let's give it to that community that we grew up in and learned our values and all those types of things. Now, here we have a blue flax. And I don't know how many of you have seen a blue flax, but they're about 3 feet tall, it seems like sometime. And try to photograph one of those and get it in focus because they're always just moving, just a shudder when you think the wind is not blowing. So I want to introduce to you Gary Blue. Gary Blue is a father, and he happens to have 2 children, Linda Blue and Matt Blue. And what we discover here is that Gary Blue is owner of property, and he's named Linda Blue as his beneficiary. All right. So later, however, Gary wrote a will, and he decided to leave that same property to his son, Matt. Changed his mind. So you know I'm going to ask, who gets that property when Gary Blue passes away? Is it going to be Linda Blue as a designated beneficiary, or is it going to be Matt Blue because he was named in the will? And don't forget, that will was written after the transfer on death deed was filed. So only 2 answers, and I know you're going to get it right. Right? Okay, Carrie's ended the poll. Drum roll, drum roll. Oh, yay! Looky, looky, looky. I am so excited. I do a dance in a public meeting when this happens because, and I'll do it for you. Because look at this. 20, you got it right. Nobody said Matt. Yay! Good for you guys. You see, that was a test. And if I had a lot of you miss that, I'd go, Marcia, you are a failure as a teacher because they missed it. You have not been clear. So good for you guys. Pat yourself on the back. Yay. Okay, next. Yep, it's Linda. Linda gets the property, and here's Matt. And he's saying, Dad wanted me to have it. Do you think they're going to get together for Thanksgiving, Christmas? No. What we've got is a problem. So we need to keep track of our beneficiary deeds and understand. And that's my concern about sometimes people doing things on their own. They don't know the consequences of a decision here like Gary did. And of course, Matt's singing the blues because he didn't get the property. Now, we could also name a nonprofit. So how about the Alzheimer's Association for an idea, of course. And now, though, we've got both Linda and Matt singing the blues. All right. So you can't undo a beneficiary deed with a will. And it doesn't matter if the will was written later or if the will was written earlier. The transfer on death deed becomes a contract. Now here we have a primrose. And my hubby said I was really stretching this, but go with me for just a second. We want to be prim and proper with our evening primrose. So what I want to tell you about to be proper and prim is we have a brand new law in Montana effective October 1st, and we can designate a vehicle or a vessel. And that doesn't go through probate. Cool. Name something that this is amazing. It went through the legislature effective October 1, and the form is an MV13. But what I discovered is it didn't exactly turn out like I anticipated because you have 4 choices of when you're going to name a beneficiary. I just thought you could do it anytime. No. You can do it when you apply for a Montana title, as in a new vehicle purchase. You can add the beneficiary's name when you are have already got one and now you want to change it or renew. And then if you want to change the person that's on there is another opportunity. And then if you want to revoke your beneficiary, then you leave that section of your title or the MV13 blank. So I'm going to be working on a mock guide on this so that people will know about it. But as I said, it just became available October 1, but I'm thrilled to be able to tell you about it. So I'm going to say take advantage of the new law, name a beneficiary on the Montana Vehicle Form 13. I hope that 13 doesn't mean it's unlucky, okay? Oh, this is one, Richardson geranium. Now, I took this photo after the rain, and I just thought it was beautiful. I was even excited because it was in focus. It's exciting to get a flower in focus. So here's Granny Richardson. Hi, Granny. I think she is so cute. And what Granny wants to do is support the Montana 4-H program. Now, she probably has some other favorite charities as well, but the 4-H program she really believes in because she was a 4-H leader. And what she has is a condo in Billings, believe it or not. And she has decided that she wants to give the money to the 4-H Foundation, but she wants to tell them how to use it. In other words, she wants to focus on a program that she's aware of. It's called the People Partners Grants. And what these grants do is allow youth in a community to decide on something that they want to do to improve that community. And I had the pleasure of judging some of these last year, and I've got to tell you, it was so impressive with what the kids came up with. So I was really glad to hear Granny Richardson wanted to do that. So what Granny Richardson could do is file a transfer on death deed, for the apartment complex with the Yellowstone Clerk and Recorder. And she makes the 4-H Foundation as the designated beneficiary. And then she is specific when she gives the check. She wants the with the TOD, she wants the proceeds to be used for the People Partners grants. And then I'm sure the 4-H Foundation is going to recognize Granny Richardson for her donation because that would be a substantial one. As a matter of fact, you may have heard that MSU got a really whopping $101 million for the nursing program at MSU. So I'm waiting for somebody to do something similar for the 4-H program. Wouldn't that just be great? Just think what they could do. So TODS could be a useful tool for helping your favorite nonprofit. Well, I can see it's about time for me to wrap it up so that we have a chance to hear from our guest today. But I hope I did steer you to an awareness of how you can use PODs and TODs on your financial accounts. And we have a resource. This is at the Fabulous Fridays, and it's called Non-Probate Transfers. And I get into detail about what is involved. I also hope I steered you towards an awareness of a transfer on death deed. It's great the legislature has given us these tools to avoid probate. If you already know who you want to receive stuff, what a great thing. So I have a mock guide. It's called Transfer on Death Deeds in Montana. So that's specific to Montana law. There are other states that also have transfer on death deeds. They're getting to be very popular now. And then I hope a bonus objective there is that I hope I steered you to an awareness of the new beneficiary designation form for a vehicle or vessel. Now, a vessel is referred to as a boat or something like that. I already had the question, is it an airplane? Nope. It doesn't work for an airplane, but it will work for your boat and some of those types of things. As I mentioned, I will be doing a future mock guide on that. And so if you would like to be a reviewer for that for me, just put your name and address in the, or no, we've got your address. Put your name in the chat room and say that you would like to review it. You see, every mock guide I've ever done, yes, I have the attorneys review it and the appropriate, like the motor vehicle department, but I want people that are out there to read it so that they can say, Marcia, you don't make sense at all. Or, hey, this part is good, but this other part bad. And if you don't have a memory like the elephant's head, Yeah, that's an elephant head, can't you tell? We have 48 different Mont guides in the estate planning area. Yep, Marcia Getting's been around for a couple of years, but they're for you. Your taxpayer dollars at work are those Mont guides. And don't forget, these Mont guides are also available at our MSU County Extension offices and also reservation offices. And as you can probably guess, the forget-me-nots are what are on that screen. What are we going to be looking at next week? What you can do with a will and what you can't do with a will. And do you need a will if you are using all these transfer on death things and what have you? Do you still need a will? We're going to talk about that. Now, let's take a look here. I decided that I'm going to have a contest every time now, just to keep it interesting. And behind me, I don't know how many noticed, but there is an extension thing. And if you can tell me what is the wording on the board behind Marcia, you put that in the chat room. And if we have more than 3, I'm afraid we're going to have to do the put it in a hat and draw it out. Carrie and I will take care of that. But just put that in the chat room of what was on that right at the top of the poster. Okay? And type that answer in the chat panel. Now, I'm going to remain on the web. Oh, doggone it. I corrected that. I've got different versions. Ignore minutes. I will stay and answer questions. So I want to introduce you to a special guest, and that is Carter Jasper. And Carter is representing the 4-H Foundation. So what I'm going to do is stop sharing the screen, and Jasper's going to come on. Jasper, I can see you. Can everybody else see Jasper?
Can you hear me, Marcia?
I can hear you. You sound great.
Perfect.
Great. Okay, I think I have some notes somewhere. And I want to introduce everybody to you. I had the opportunity to meet Jasper at my very first 4-H Foundation meeting. And I was quite impressed with this young man, with his ability to ask questions and share. And anyway, I thought I got to have him on our show. So Carter, tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you got interested in 4-H.
So yeah, my name's Carter Jasper. I'm from St. Regis, Montana, which is in Mineral County. And I kind of got interested in 4-H, kind of how every other 4-H'er gets in 4-H. I had friends in the organization, and then, 9 years later, here I am.
Wow, 9 years of 4-H'er, huh?
Yep.
Well, what's your favorite project in 4-H?
I would have to say my sport fishing project is my favorite. And actually, I kind of found and discovered and did this project only 2 years, or I guess a year ago, when we were in the beginning of the pandemic and we were kind of all locked at home. I decided, wow, I really need to find a new hobby that's outdoors and doesn't involve many people. And so I found fly fishing. And then, later in the year when we were picking our 4-H projects, I found I it just caught my eye by accident. It said sport fishing. And so I read in more into it, and I was like, wow, I could use my love of fly fishing for as a 4-H project. And I think that's the cool thing about 4-H is we have over 200 projects that youth in Montana can do. And if you don't like any of those 200 plus projects, you can do a self-determined project, which means you do what you're passionate about and we'll help you turn it into a project.
Yeah, I don't remember sports fishing growing up in Kansas and being a 4-H'er, but where do you fish around your area?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty fortunate. I have 2 pretty awesome rivers right next to me. I have the Clark Fork River, and then I have the St. Regis River, and both are pretty good for fishing. They get pretty cold in the springtime though, so I don't know. It's hard to stand in the river and fish for, 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, um, it's amazing, when we drive up the canyon here in Gallatin County and seeing the number of fisher people out there, and maybe it's snowing just a little bit, and
Right.
then on a perfect day you see lots and lots of people, and it's really great. When he said that what is it, 200 projects
Yep.
that the 4-H program has. And don't they have one that's called self-determined? What does that do?
So self-determined project, like I talked about before, is what it allows you to take whatever you're passionate about and kind of makes you got to mold it into a 4-H project. So say you didn't like any of the 200 plus projects that Montana 4-H offers, you can take your project, or you can take what you're passionate about and turn it into a project. So you can still be a part of the 4-H organization even if they don't have a specific project for your interests.
Hmm. Okay, and you are on the 4-H Foundation.
Correct.
What group do you represent then?
One of my main responsibilities to represent the youth of 4-H, and because 4-H is an organization to promote youth and youth leadership, and so I'm kind of just the voice on the foundation to make sure that the youth wants and needs are represented on the board.
Ah, okay. How long have you been on the foundation board?
I've been fortunate enough to be on the foundation for this is my third year. Um,
Okay.
this current year, I'm the state ambassador for the Montana 4-H Foundation, or one of the state ambassadors, so that means I'm one of the four state ambassadors for the whole state of Montana, and one of my secondary titles is foundation trustee. But the 2 years before that, I was the youth at large member, which means they just so there's two youth positions on Montana 4-H Foundation board. And I was the youth at large, which means you apply to the Montana 4-H Foundation, and so they have the state ambassador position, which I am now, and then a youth at large where you apply and you're selected for a 1 year term. And I was fortunate enough to do that for 2 years.
Okay, well, last week we had Cassandra on, but we had trouble with the internet system. Why don't you explain some more about what the ambassadors do in the 4-H program?
Yeah, so the 4-H Montana 4-H state ambassadors, we go across the state of Montana. So I personally have been to 5 counties. I can't talk about the other three of us, but what we do is we go to the counties, we see how awesome our 4-Hers is doing, because I'll tell you, Marcia, every time I go to a new county, I'm even more surprised than I was the last time. I mean, we have some amazing 4-Hers in Montana 4-H, and so I'm kind of a sounding board, because when you go through a lot of different counties, you see a lot of different things. So, when I was in Lewis and Clark County, I see a lot of cool things. And so, then I go to the Missoula County Fair, and, when they're asking me questions, I say, well, this is what Lewis and Clark is doing. Or, if I go to a smaller county, like I've grown up in Mineral County, which is not a big metropolitan area, if you guys know where that is. And so maybe I go to a small county like Sanders County, which is just, right up the road from Mineral County. And I say, this is what we're doing 20 miles away. Maybe this could work for you guys also. So I'm a sounding board. I'm a spokesman for 4-H at a state level. And, I just do whatever I'm told.
Well, it's just really great. It seems like the ambassadors were involved in 4-H Congress, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the 4-H state ambassadors, what we do is we plan the events. So we organize, we run, and we are kind of just the all-around leaders of state Congress. We're fortunate enough to have some awesome adult leaders that help us along the way. But the awesome thing about 4-H Congress is it's planned and run by the youth.
Yes, I had a chance to see that last couple of years of attending. And one of the things that I got to judge was the communications area where the youth were applying for a job. And then they would come in and we would ask them about, do a real live interview type of thing.
Right.
And I remember the day, you're scared to death, and you can tell some are, but the next year, because I've done it more than once, you see the improvement that is made. And I think that's part of the 4-H program is you have a chance to see what you're talented at and grow that along the way. So how did you cope this past year with not being able to get together until Congress?
Yeah, 4-H, we're always proud to say that we didn't shut down. 4-H adapted to the ever-changing circumstances that this pandemic brought us. We found ways. We zoomed for our club meetings. We had our county events outside. We broke them up. We did. And this wasn't just in Mineral County. This was from all across the state. And I think that shows the the passion that our youth in 4-H have about Montana 4-H, and the passion about their projects. And even I can remember, I have friends in Missoula County and Lewis and Clark County, and it was kind of sad that I wasn't able to see them at like fall ambassador training, but it just made seeing them much more sweet at 4-H Congress in July.
Yeah, well, last week we had Brett on, and she was talking about some of the training that she was doing on a Sunday afternoon, because that's the time that you guys had available. Did you get to participate in some of that?
Yeah, so we have about one Zoom a month, just touch base. We have fall ambassador training coming up next weekend, and what that is where we get all the county ambassadors, and then us 4 state ambassadors, and even just club leaders and youth leaders throughout the state of Montana. We come together this year. It's in Billings, Montana, and we teach and kind of show our young leaders in Montana 4-H how to, like, different ways to interact with specific people that you're running into in 4-H, how to lead workshops, how to communicate. Because what specifically one of my workshops is communicating with different people in 4-H. So you have your club leaders, you have your and you have your county agents, and just how to communicate with them, because and there's also generational gaps, because some people who may have been born in your generation, Marcia, communicate differently than how I communicate. And like I'm just grabbing at straws here, but you might be a more email person where I only check my email about twice a day, to be completely honest with you. So if you want to get a hold of me, you text me. And those are things that we got to teach our team leaders, is how to communicate most effectively. And so, yep, so we Zoom every Sunday, probably about once a month, and we just touch base. We say, all right, what are we doing? What's going on? What's coming up? So yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah. So there's state ambassadors, and then
Mhm.
there's the county ambassadors. And
Correct.
that's where you're pulling both of these together for this
Uh-huh.
training. Okay, what do you see as the role of leaders, your adult leaders in the 4-H program?
I see them more as kind of guides. I don't think adult leaders in 4-H need to be, come on, come on, come on, let's do this. Because we have some amazingly motivated people in Montana 4-H. I mean, as I said, I've been to 5 counties, and I've been amazed at every single one of them, just how passionate and motivated they are about their projects and about 4-H in general. So we really don't need leaders who are like, come on, come on, come on. We just need leaders who, like, hey, I have a question about my project in blank. So adult leaders in Montana 4-H are more of like guides and question answerers, because of just how extremely awesome our kids are and our youth are in Montana 4-H.
Yeah, just rah rah, they're great. Um,
Hmm.
what do you feel is the most important thing that 4-H has taught you?
I would just have to say communication, because you interact with kids from completely different parts of the state. Like, I'm from about as west as you can go in Montana before you hit Idaho. I mean, my exit is 33, so I'm only 33 miles away from Idaho. But through my interactions with kids, from Yellowstone County or Dawson County, or even even Carter County, you interact with people from different parts of the state, and so their experiences in 4-H are completely different than mine in some ways, and so just learning how to communicate better with kids, and learning how to communicate with adults is a huge thing too, because you have your county extension agents they have to communicate with, your club leaders and your activity leaders they have to communicate with. So I think communication is the best thing that I've learned through my time in 4-H.
Mm-hmm. So, a quick one. What would you say is the most important thing you have contributed to the 4-H program?
I think I would have to say, just the best thing I've contributed is hopefully giving back what I've gotten. I've had some amazing role models in my time in Montana 4-H. I've been able to participate in a 4-H multi-county 4-H camp in Western Montana. I've been able to serve on the Montana 4-H Foundation. I've been able to be a state ambassador, and all the people who've come before me and motivated me in 4-H. They've left a huge impact on me, and I hope to give a younger 4-H'er than me the same awesome experience and awesome time in 4-H that I've had.
Well, that's great, Carter. Everybody, this is an example of youth in the 4-H program, and he gets to participate in some of the things that the 4-H Foundation sponsors, some of the trips, the get-together, the ambassadors, and what have you. So we thank you very much, Carter, for being with us today. And I suppose we better let you get back to your classes, right? Because he is a senior, and it's not good to be skipping classes. So if you need a note from me, I won't text it, but I'll send it by email, okay?
You got it, Marcia, and thanks again for having me on.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Carter. Bye-bye.
Yep, thank you. See ya.
Okay, well, the rest of you, I think it's time for us to get to some of those questions. I hope you're as impressed as I am with Carter there. It's good. It gives me hope for the future when you see youth like this at that younger age, really taking leadership roles, communicating, and even realizing that there's a different way of communicating. Here, I watch him at the board meeting, and he's texting like crazy. And if there's anything going on that's techie, Carter's the one you ask. And yeah, I couldn't even begin to contribute that, but I hope I can contribute other things. Okay, Carrie, what kind of questions? Any in the chat room?
Yes, here's the first question. Isn't probate required to pass real property, land, mineral rights?
Okay, is probate required to probate? Sorry, is probate required to transfer land? No. Okay,
And
mineral
and then
rights.
also mineral. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so the mineral rights, we'll need to take a look at looking at those two ways. Minerals that are in the ground are considered as real property. Okay, when you have minerals coming out of the ground, then what you've got is personal property, such as oil. So there's royalty checks and some of those kinds of things. Those can be designated by a will. Right now, we don't have TODs unless a company makes that possible. So what you see, for example, is sometimes when grandma dies and there is no will, the property goes down to the grandkids as far as these royalty checks, let's put it that way. And then they go on down even further. So that's why grandma might want to write a will and indicate that she wants to will those and skip a generation. She can do that. But right now, we don't have any transferability for the royalties unless the company allows something like that. Okay, another question.
Yes, my bank is in Michigan. Will Montana or Michigan estate law apply to these accounts?
Okay, we're getting a little bit into the legal there, but I'll tell you from an educational viewpoint. You see, when you die with a will, your will can control personal property. So your will can control wherever that account is. I think you said Michigan. So you can say, I want my account in Michigan, or maybe it's a part of the residue of your estate to go to so-and-so. But if you die without writing a will, and it's solely owned in Michigan, then we'll have to have a probate to determine who is going to receive the money in the account. So a good idea might be to go take a look at Michigan where you have this account and see if they offer the possibility of a payable on death designation on that account. And then that will avoid an ancillary, that's what they call it in another state, an ancillary probate. So check out Michigan and see what you signed. You can ask for a copy of that and they will send that to you so that you know what is going on with that account.
Okay, next question. Does having probate mean you need an attorney?
Okay, does having probate mean you need to have an attorney? Not necessarily, to be quite honest. Now, I know the attorneys would prefer that they handle it because they know what they're doing, you know? And here we are, and we don't know all the ins and outs, but there are, as I mentioned, these 5 ways of handling probate. And one of those is collection of personal property by affidavit. Well, no, we don't need to have an attorney do that. As a matter of fact, I had a situation with a lady with stocks and bonds, or well, in this case, stock. And what happened is the company was out of business, but they still had to handle these stock. And so she was just wanting to do it herself. And so we had the affidavit of death on our extension website, and she was able to utilize that and move on. We also have a summary administrative procedure. And that, though, is done before the court if we have like 2 daughters and the 2 daughters are just nick and nick, they're fighting, and so it's under the supervision of the court, and then it's a lot more expensive. Then there's one that if the estate and you know, we can get the debts taken care of, then an individual can do it. It's just the individual doesn't necessarily know all the details of things to do. Now, we do have a Mont guide that's called Personal Representative Responsibilities. It could be duties, but anyway, it's a Mont guide that lists, you know, and I had the legislature one time, or a committee wanted me to come up with all the things that are handled in a probate, so you could do it yourself. So, but it varies. Your estate is different than my estate. And if you don't know the details, sometimes it can be difficult. Now, I understand it's really a challenge when you go to an attorney and the attorney flat out says, well, I'll need $5,000 down to start. You don't have $5,000 down. So what the courts of limited jurisdiction have done, this is a committee that the Supreme Court appointed and said, we want you to do a small estate packet so that the forms are in there. There's information on how to use the forms. And so that might be something that you would take a look at. And we've got that at our probate and personal representative websites as well. We'll get into that more on one of our other sessions that we're going to have.
Okay, next question. Can you name a trust as your beneficiary?
Yes, you can. Let's see, we haven't really talked about testamentary trusts, for example. But let's say that you say upon your death, you want your, let's say you've got a transfer on death deed for your house. And you can say, I want to transfer that to the Marcia Getting Testamentary Trust. In other words, when I die, it would go into the trust, and then my trust would indicate how that home is to be used. I could say it could be sold, or no, I want to leave it for my husband to use, but I want the trust to pay insurance, taxes, and replace the roof if necessary, etc. So you can have a living trust or you can have a testamentary trust. And we will be talking about those in the future. We have a whole session that's designed to talk about living and testamentary trusts.
Okay, great. So the next question is what if the beneficiary has not been told? Would someone tell them?
Okay, what if the beneficiary hasn't been told? This got really interesting after we had our beneficiary deeds law, because you see a lot of that now is on the computer. on the computer, on the internet. So this lady was really upset. She was out of Great Falls and she said, "Do you know that they listed my beneficiaries?" And I didn't want them to know. Oh, phone was hot. And I don't blame her, because you want to feel like that's a personal issue of who you want to be the beneficiary. Now, I'm not saying that every Tom, Dick, and Harry is going to look it up on the web to see, who your beneficiaries are. So you don't have to tell them. But what happens when somebody dies, there's kind of, they call it the green sheet that goes around the community. And it's just letting people know that so-and-so has died. And so the bankers look and see if they have any accounts for that person and what have you. So it gets out there. And you probably should have a list of last instructions, under which you say, "I have a will. It's in the top of the closet. Hopefully it's in the safe deposit box." You tell where that is, and then the individual that's going to step into your shoes when you're gone will know, oh, here's somebody that's named as a beneficiary. Now, it doesn't mean you die and 3 minutes later people go out and take your money out of the checking account. No, they have to wait at least 5 days before they can submit an affidavit, for example. So these kind of details I've tried to include in the Mont guides so that you can read those and then know what opportunity, or, make a decision. Do I want to have a transfer on death deed and have the public know? But you need to know that a will is a matter of public record as well. If you submit your will to probate, the will is a matter of public record. So that Tom, Dick, and Harry could go in and look at it. Now, do they? I don't know. But it just makes a difference. And that's why often people go to a trust, because a trust document is not submitted for probate and it keeps it more within the family. So now we got to talk real advantages and disadvantages of trust. And we'll do that in a session.
Okay, next question. Does probate cost money, and does it take a lot of time?
It can. It depends on the estate. We've had situations in Montana where the reality is we've had 4 attorneys disbarred for not doing the appropriate things with a probate. And you see, you have to print something to the creditors in the newspapers. There's requirements that go on. And most of that you should be able to do 6 to 9 months. But we do have estates that, oh my goodness, they are so complicated. We had one gentleman pass away with 50 different savings accounts across the state of Montana, and he hadn't told anybody where they were. So they had to wait until the 1099 forms came at tax time to go, oh, Joe has one over here and he has one over there. Well, that probate got a little expensive, because now probate fees have to be reasonable. And that could be by how long does it take? And so if it's not closed in 2 years, the Supreme Court administrator in the county notifies the district judge. They've got all this on computer now, and says, and the district judge then calls in the attorney, if there is one, and the personal representative, and says, what's going on here? Why hasn't this estate been settled? Well, it could be that we're trying to sell some land out there, and at this point the land's not selling. That could be a reason. Or it could be, well, one of the heirs is in the service and we haven't been able to contact him because he's off somewhere. So there are reasons that the court will accept for that, but there are other reasons where they say no. And boy, to get disbarred, you got to be pretty incompetent, I would say. That's a value judgment there. Okay, next question.
Yes. So MV13 can't be used on vehicles we already own. Is that correct?
At this point in time, that's one of the things that I'm wanting to figure out, because I thought the intent was that you could file this at any time. And that's not the way that it's being presented. And so I just want to clarify that, and we have not, the person and I trading phone calls and emails back and forth on that. But it'd be a good question to ask, and then it would get people interested because, for example, in the process of buying a car, and I told them I wanted to do a beneficiary designation on that. And they said, no, 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 you can't do that. Other states have that, but Montana doesn't. And you could imagine my pleasure of saying, well, if you will look it up and say, yeah. And so I've got that. I'm going to have it in my name, and then my husband will be my beneficiary. So I'm going to take advantage of it and see how the system works. Next question.
Okay, you have 2 more questions, Marcia.
Thank you.
Does this apply to manufactured homes, not owned land, or permanent foundations? I think that meant on permanent foundations.
Well, if it's on a permanent foundation, don't you own the land too? And I would be concerned if I didn't own the land because, good question. Put that, Carrie, make sure that's associated with the name, and I'll check that out. But be clear, does the person own the land? If they own the land and the home, yes, you can do a transfer on death deed. If you're just renting the home and the land, well, no, it's not yours. But that's an excellent one.
Yeah, Marcia, I think sometimes what happens is people own the manufactured home, but then they put it on a lot that they're renting.
Oh, right. Yes. Let me check.
So last question, how complicated would it be to convert my sister from joint owner of my vehicle to an MV13 beneficiary?
Okay. Now in this case, you already own something and you're wanting to change the title. So you notify the, there is another form. They have forms like this, many of them. It's amazing. And almost anything you want to do, like sever a joint tenancy on a motor vehicle and retitle it, because that's really what you're doing, is taking it from these 2 people that own it, and you're going to change it to your name only. Well, find that form, and then you would do the MV13 at the same time, because you are retitling and we can do the beneficiary designation. And if you can't do that, let me know. I would want to check into that further. But the way I read is you would be able to do it at that point in time.
Marcia, those are all the questions.
That's all the questions. All right. Well, we went a little bit over today. So I thank you very much for those of you that stayed around. And I'm going to leave you because I'm supposed to be doing a tax institute. In other words, listening, getting updated on all these new estate planning proposals that have been made at the federal level. Some of them are a little scary, and oh well, we'll see what happens. So thank you for tuning in today. We'll look forward to seeing you next Friday at another Fabulous Fridays. And in the meantime, do be safe and keep healthy. Bye-bye. Okay, Carrie, you still there?
I am.
Okay, good. So what we do at this point then, just for refresh my memory, is you shut off the recording. You're going to say,
I can, yeah.